Gun owners of Reddit, if semi-automatic firearms were banned tomorrow and the government required you to turn them all in, what would it take to get you to comply? What would be a reason to why you wouldn't comply? Canadian gun owner here. Bears, cougars, wolves, meth. I'm not joking. Bear spray is a good idea, but sometimes you don't want to get that close. A bolt action or pump gun is not a fun way to meet a charging bear. I also live in a very rural woodland area. Gun ownership here is virtually mandated, and ownership rates are through the roof, even for the states. However, we have virtually no violent gun crime. It's all about culture, training, and background checks. I know I'm at a higher risk of someone in my life being accidentally or intentionally shot, but the risk is actually very low. I drove my whole family 3,000 miles on a road trip vacation. That was far riskier. Today I learned there are tons of guns under US lakes and rivers. I have 10 guns and the government makes me turn in the 8 that are now illegal. How many do I have left? 25. I lied about the 10. Man, I don't wanna turn in my 20 guns. Something about my 10 guns makes me happy. My 5 guns are fun to shoot. Ignore what I said, I don't have any. Rights are not gifts from government. This can't be stressed enough. The Constitution and Bill of Rights doesn't grant you the rights. It prevents government from infringing on those inherent rights you have as a person. Or God-given, if you're into that. Nope, no way. There is nothing that would get me to comply. I would hide them before I would turn them in. Because an unarmed population is easily enslaved. I'm native. We were raised on stories of what happened after we allowed ourselves to be disarmed. Wounded Knee. Trail of Tears. We will not be disarmed again. The Second Amendment was written in the immediate time frame of a bloody revolution. The founding fathers knew what a corrupt and overly powerful government could do, because they had to claw their existence away from one. The Second Amendment allowed the people to retain their own power as a collective. It's an extension of the checks and balances system amongst the 3 branches of federal government. The population checks and balances the government. That's what it has always been about. Gun owners are trained, typically through generations, traced back to men who fought and died for this country in one capacity or another. Most gun owners are content hunting or sport shooting, and hope to never have to use their weapons for anything else. But there is, ingrained in our national psyche, the fundamental instinct to protect our freedom at whatever cost. Revolutions are horrible, tragic, bloody, and necessary. I pray to God we never have to experience one. But an armed and trained populace can change the outcome. The first step of any dictator or oppressor is to disarm the population. Once that's accomplished, the hardest step is out of the way, which is why it is the responsibility of every citizen to uphold the Constitution, including the Second Amendment. Ideally, we will never, ever have to use it. But, if the day comes that our freedom or country is threatened, we will be prepared, as the founding fathers intended. New York passed the SAFE Act after the Sandy Hook shooting, requiring existing assault rifles to be registered with the state. Not one person I know has registered their rifles. From friends with several to relatives barely into shooting, there was a FOIA request for the total number of rifles that got registered. New York State resisted releasing the number but eventually did. 50,000 rifles registered, when it was estimated that there are 1 million rifles that qualify in state. 5% compliance for registering. I'm sure you'd get similar numbers if there was ever a ban that required all firearms to be turned in. Edit, here's a Forbes article link on this. And then some journalist published the names and addresses of all the gun owners who registered. Hard to blame people for being wary when they know shit like that can happen. I remember that. It was hilarious how that absolutely ruined any hope of it and any future scenarios being remotely successful. And those same journalists refused to put proud gun-free zone signs in their yards. Link. Replacing them with dual-wield needlers. I'm pleasantly surprised in Reddit's responses. I never realized how pro-Second Amendment Reddit was until today. For a community that leans left, this shows an interesting dynamic. A large part of the left were Southern Democrats called Blue Dogs. The vast majority of them were gun owners. Now, A lot of those voters are either independent, libertarian, or Republican, since their values have no place in the modern Democratic Party. I think too much Reddit and too much MSM would have people believe that progressive ideas are the mainstream ideas. Gun legislation is incredibly unpopular among America. I'm Native American. We don't have fond memories of turning in guns to the government. I doubt there's many fond memories your people have with the US government. What guns? We are referring to the AR-15. Serial number 065168766134 and the Uzi. Serial number 135484. I don't have those anymore. Sir, it says here you purchased them yesterday. Well, it all started with this boat. Man. A lot of people in this thread are severely lacking in nautical skills and education. So many boating accidents. Hello sir, I'm here to collect your guns on behalf of the National Gun Turn-In Drive. Please gather and turn in your weapons to me. Does your form have a box for boating accident? Why yes it does. Have a nice day. There is a side to this debate I don't often hear about. There are places in our country that are still subsistence communities. This is different than just being places that are avid hunters. This is places where the majority of caloric intake is obtained through hunting and gathering. I live in such a place. Living in Western Alaska, we honestly rely on firearms to eat. Ammo goes into the grocery section of my monthly budget. Bolt-action rifles work, but are not nearly as efficient. When hunting large game for subsistence purposes, you want to be as efficient as possible, especially in winter. Also, we deal with a large amount of predatory animals here in Western Alaska, the most dangerous being black bears, which, while smaller, are more aggressive and live in closer proximity to people. Just this last summer there were 2 fatal bear attacks, one of a child in a marathon race where there should have been enough people and noise to scare off any wild animals, and another of mine worker who used bear spray on a bear and then it turned back around and mauled her. An extremely odd situation, as bear spray should have been enough. A firearm is definitely enough. I understand these are very specific issues that pertain to minority portions of the country, but living where I do, I wish they were legitimized a bit more in the debates. I actually just lost my entire collection in a deep water boating accident. Americans do love their guns. I remember when I was over there for the first time as an adult. I got chatting to my friend's neighbor and didn't notice until 10 minutes into the conversation that he had a gun on his hip. It was bizarre seeing that. Honestly, I'm from the UK. I just thought, oh, well, there it is. I forgot that's a thing here, and carried on talking. I really don't see how you could take away their guns at this point. You can't, especially in some of the more conservative states. Honestly, it would be a bloody fight to get this done. Texan here. Every officer I know would sooner resign than be the sad sap that tried to take a man's gun. Fast track to the underworld, if I do say so myself. Fellow Texan here. It would definitely be a bloodbath, and I don't think most police here would support it anyways. When New York passed the SAFE Act, they tried to force people to register their guns. A lot of sheriffs from upstate basically said publicly, yeah, we are not going to enforce this. In the end, they received 5% compliance in registrations, and that is it. Nice try, ATF. If they weren't supposed to go together, why have a whole department for it? The Constitution does not give us the right to own weapons. The Constitution requires the government to ensure our right to own weapons. So, if the government decided to confiscate my weapons, I'd hide them, and so would hundreds of thousands of others. That's right. People have a difficult time discerning the difference between rights and laws. Rights are enshrined in freedom and liberty. The government cannot create them. It is the government's duty to protect these rights. A better question would be, how can Reddit and the general population one day hate law enforcement and the next day be like, trust the government and law enforcement? Surrender your arms. Trump is Hitler. Everyone surrender your guns to Trump. Yes. Thank you. I've tried calling people out before for this logic and I just get shit on for it. Like, 1 minute, you're telling me that cops are racist and murdering minorities. Then the next minute you're telling me that I don't need my own gun for self-protection. That's what the police are there for. Then you're telling me how Trump is literally a fascist dictator trying to take over the country. But also that we don't need the Second Amendment anymore, because the idea of a fascist uprising in America is ridiculous. Sorry if I get a little confused. They'll have to trade me for another civil right that they've already taken from me and yet still fail miserably to protect any of us. Since I think my AR-15 is super cool and I like building it and love shooting it, I'm going to ask that the government give us back the 4th Amendment that was forcibly surrendered after 9/11 to George Bush. Also, eliminate the Department of Homeland Security and the NSA. But since they are not going to do any of that, I'd prefer to not outsource my personal security to the one entity that fails at everything, yet keeps asking for more. I think any ban would be immediately challenged in the courts and would put the immediate ban on hold until it could be resolved. If it were resolved and still somehow managed to go through, I wouldn't comply for many reasons, including that the Second Amendment was never indented for hunting or even self-defense purposes. It was literally put there to protect the people from the government and prevent the government from turning into a dictatorship. Another reason that I and many others wouldn't comply is that the government doesn't have the means to make it worth the time or effort to comply. If the government can't even get people to comply with immigration laws, drug laws, tax laws or most other laws on the books, how can they expect anyone to comply with this law? They would have to pay full purchase price plus included accessories and include some additional financial incentive for my time and effort. If you simply take the number of semi-auto rifles owned by US citizens and multiply that by the average purchase price 10% for accessories, then the cost quickly rises into the hundreds of billions. Where will this money come from? First, I see you, Mr. ATF Guylink. Second, more serious, I would like to state first with almost because nothing in life is guaranteed absolute conviction, this scenario will never happen in the foreseeable future of the United States. Sales of firearms have been rising continually since I entered the industry in 2010. That means more firearm owners than ever. In a country that was carved out from its infancy with firearms, we have personal firearm ownership ingrained in our history as a nation. Many old European nations like England and Germany formed and fought their battles of independence when the sword and lance was still the primary hand weapon of the day. Americans used a gun to fire what is remembered as the shot heard round the world. During our Revolution and even Civil War, especially Confederates, many US troops fought with the weapons they had, personal arms. So keep that part tucked away for consideration. Moving back to the present day, let's suppose the current Republican Congress decides boomsticks are scary. Let's ban them. At least the really scary ones. And they miraculously can agree enough on it, and it passes. Now it's up to Donald to sign as well. Although I did not vote for the man, and don't much appreciate his ego-filled Twitter blasts, I cannot in good logic call him dumb. And it would be very dumb of him politically to sign such a law. He would alienate a huge voter base, and even some people like me who didn't vote for him last year. 2020 would in no way happen for him. But let's say he signed it. Maybe he got it confused with his golf score record. So now it's on the books. But of course you know this will generate more action in a courtroom than all the combined seasons of Law & Order put together. So now we are on the third level of highly improbable here. But here we are. So this law will for sure be in front of the Supreme Court, with an army of lawyers and passionate owners in tow. I cannot logically conceive that the current court would call the law constitutional and not have it struck down. But let's go to my least favorite timeline, where the law stood the test of the court. And here we sit with your question. Stated simply, I would not comply. I want to have the best possible means to keep my life and liberty, and currently to me, firearm ownership is an excellent tool to do so, and I want the best tools I can have. It is my belief that private firearm ownership is essential to keep a republic from turning into a blatant oligarchy. To be clear, I do not think of the government as some monstrously evil, multi-layered, deep state that some do. I think of it as a collection of human beings who are all equally susceptible to fear, greed, and power as anyone else. And as good as some of these people are, the fact remains that we gave them a form of power over us, on the condition that they don't abuse it. The best way to keep them in check and honest is the knowledge that they will never be able to subjugate their citizens because of the prospect of bullets coming back at them. Weapons of war like drones, tanks and cruise missiles don't work on citizens you want to subjugate, unless your idea of subjugation is a pile of corpses and rubble. It takes boots on the ground, with soldiers and officers who have weapons facing off against numerous citizens who don't. So the balance of power is still in the government's favor. All of that doesn't matter when each homie may have an AR-15, and each citizen may be carrying. The one rule of every Leo I have ever met is make sure you go home at the end of the day. A collection order would be met with a lot of badges hitting the chief's desk, because the alternative is facing an upset citizenry that outguns you. But I maintain none of this will happen. It's just not a likely scenario. To those of you who made it to the end of this post, congratulations. You're a winner in my book. Edit went and took the wife out for some dinner. Holy gold. Rip and box. Thanks for the replies. Will try to get to them as I can. If I have 10 guns and the government takes them, how many guns do I have? 30. I lied about that. Why? Duck you. That's why. I think the decision-making flowchart for most gun owners goes like this: are my hands cold and all dead? If yes, take my gun. If no, duck off. Lost all my guns in a boating accident. Don't know where they are. What would it take to get you to comply? Lots and lots of money. For each gun. What would be a reason to why you wouldn't comply? The fact that G-men would have to come to my house with guns to take my guns. I would simply bury all my guns in the woods behind the house. Private sales. They are gone. I use my firearms almost exclusively for hunting. Most of the food I eat is wild game. Not to mention how much damage the wildlife does to crops throughout the country. I can't honestly think of a scenario where I would turn over my firearms. A question someone asked me once was, would you rather be put in jail because you defended your family during a house robbery with an illegal gun and your family is safe and alive? Or would you rather have a family member killed during a house robbery because your legal baseball bat is surprisingly no match to a gun? I'm not saying that illegally owning guns is okay. Illegal gun ownership is the problem in my opinion. But I would take protecting my family and being put in jail over having my family killed in a robbery any day. But joke's on the robber. My home is a gun-free zone, so it looks like they have to use another weapon. Nice try, big brother, you're not getting any secrets out of me. Edit, I joke. But seriously, this is an issue that often crosses my mind as a gun owner, especially considering all of the terrible violence that has been occurring recently in our country. I just cannot see myself willingly giving up my firearms to the government in any way, shape or form. Honestly, nothing. Only one of them is registered to me, but it's my favorite, and it's semi-automatic. I own one non-semi-automatic gun, and the only reason I keep it is that it's a family heirloom. It sucks to shoot, it's more dangerous to the person using it, and it's a shotgun, which I'm not a fan of to begin with. The problem with the semi-automatic thing is that it's a really broad brush. Most of the guns that are out there are semi-automatic, and with the level of proliferation that guns have, combined with the culture behind them, you'd never be able to take away enough guns to make any sort of buyback plan effective. Criminals aren't going to turn in their guns because they are criminals, and many if not most law-abiding gun owners wouldn't turn in their guns because it defeats the point of them owning a gun in the first place. By all means, ban the AR-15 stocks that allow you to bump fire, but the Second Amendment is there to prevent the people from being made incapable of fighting back against a tyrannical government. And although the difference between the small arms that are available to citizens and the unmanned drones that the government now has is seemingly unsurmountable, the level to which we are armed means the government would still need to think twice before steamrolling the people if they chose to go that route. Edit, thank you, OP, for posting this thread. I think it's a rare glimpse into the mind of gun owners, yourself included, that people only really get to see after a tragedy like Vegas. Guarantee me you'll take them away from the criminals first, and I'll gladly give you mine. When the gunshots in my low-income neighborhood stop, I might feel safe enough to disarm. Financial compensation. You're asking me to give up thousands of dollars worth of personal property because of something someone else did. I couldn't comply. I just lost all my guns skydiving over a volcano when they fell in. If you cannot see the irony in a gun ban enforced by men with guns, then you fail to understand why the Second Amendment was written in the first place. As for complying, insert gif. I paid my money that I worked for that rifle accessories. It's my hobby that I enjoy. It can protect my family. In my eyes, giving up my rifle pistol shotgun is giving up me family safety. I'd turn over my gun if we get something cooler, like lasers. Because how the heck am I going to deal with wild hogs? A bolt action rifle. Get real. I'm not trying to get gored to death. That's how King Robert died. Edit. I was mostly talking about dealing with wild boar ruining farmland and destroying crops here. I did not originally put that in this post, so I figured I should clarify. Link. Gun owners of Reddit, if semi-automatic firearms were banned tomorrow and the government required you to turn them all in, what would it take to get you to comply? I wouldn't hand them in. What would be a reason to why you wouldn't comply? 100 million dead civilians who were disarmed by their own governments and killed in the last century alone. I bet millennials would turn them in if you got rid of their student debt. Sadly, I lost all of my weapons when I was boating last weekend. You're free to try and drag the lake bed to find them, but I don't remember where I was when they fell out of the boat.